Today we are going to look at and compare three vintage receivers from the 1970s. We'll compare their looks, their features, and most importantly how they sound. Today's three receivers are the Sony STR-6055, the Sansui Six, and the Kenwood KR-4070. Let's get started. The Sony STR-6055 was made between 1971 and 1974 and retailed for between $300 and $320 depending on the year. It was marketed with the similar looking 18-watt STR-6045 and the 50-watt 6065. At 40 watts, the STR-6055 stand in between these two. I've also seen it advertised with the top-of-the-line Sony at the time, the 60-watt STR-6200F, and even the 35-watt STR-7055. I will say that apparently Sony liked to make their wattage numbers look good by quoting these IHF music power wattages. I'm not sure what that even means, but it seems like Sony was trying to make themselves look good in their ads back in 1972. Of course, other publications printed the more common wattage specifications. All right, here is the very good looking STR-6055. Nice looking machine, but some odd and confusing functions on the front. For starters, instead of a balance knob, you have this volume knob where you can do left and right individually. Same for the tone controls, do them individually. And then your speakers, instead of usually A and B, it's main, both, off, and remote. High filter, and then this is the ability to switch your speakers around from left to right, right to left. Nice feature. I mentioned this in another Sony video. I do like it. Tape monitor. This is where it gets a little odd. You got a phono input, an aux input, where you can put it there and get these, which allows you to go between FM stereo, mono, AM, or aux 2, which really is a headphone jack. It's got the world's tiniest tuning meter. I believe I have white LEDs in there. We'll find out when we open it up. The Sansui Six was made between 1972 and 1973 and retailed for $400. It was part of the series that included the 7, 8, and 8 Deluxe, although it looks like the 8 came out before the others and was then replaced by the superior 8 Deluxe. These three, the 6, 7, and 8 Deluxe, were Sansui's upper line receivers, while other Sansui receivers at the time, like the 210 and 350A, were considered to be their budget models. So here we have the front of the Sansui Six. It does have a lot of features on it. It's got the signal meter, but it has 3 speaker outputs, high and low filters, loudness, but it has 2 phono inputs, 2 tape inputs. It had where you could put in a 4-channel adapter or a Dolby adapter, FM muting. For tape 2, you can even make connections with these phono plugs up front. I believe it's got white lights in it. We'll find out when we take the case off. If you've watched my other comparison videos, you'll know I already used the Kenwood KR-4070 in a video once before. The reason I picked it again is because the KR-4070 is a good benchmark for quality. And what I mean by that is, to me, the 4070 straddles the line between good and just average performance. If a receiver sounds better than the 4070, then it's a really good receiver. And if it doesn't sound as good as the 4070, then it's not particularly special. Quick look at the features on the Kenwood. You got 2 speaker outputs, tone controls, loudness, 1 phono, 1 aux, and 1 tape input. Blue lights. Here's a quick look at all 3 of them. You can see the Sansui is narrower than the Kenwood. The Sansui, however, is way heavier than that Kenwood. I'm going to put the weights on the screen. I've not looked them up, but the Sansui and the Sony are quite a bit heavier than that Kenwood, which sits in the middle. The biggest difference is in the options that came on this thing. These things are, this has 2 speaker outputs, 2 speaker outputs. Sansui had 3 speaker outputs. Sansui had 2 phono and 2 tape, 1 phono, tape, 1 phono, 1 tape. Those are your biggest differences. You get 2 meters on the Kenwood. Kenwood looks quite a bit different, but there you go. So quick comparison of the cases. We have the Sansui is wood No wood here on the Kenwood. I believe it could come with the wooden case. That was optional. You rarely see it with it. And then the Sony is wood. Not only is the Sony wood, but it is wood on all four sides. Gives it that more classy look. To work on the amplifier portion, you'd have to take some screws out the bottom and just shove that outside of the wooden case. So we're going to look at the back of all three. I think we're going to find out that Sansui is going to be our winner. It's got spring-loaded speaker terminals, which in my opinion are better than these twist-down ones that the Kenwood has. But these are still better than the bare screw head of the Sony. Do not care for those. Nothing else really going on in the back of the Sony or the Kenwood. But the Sansui has the pre-out main in jumpers for you to isolate the preamp and the main amp. It also has speaker fuses, which protects your speakers and the amp itself. Only this mess here shouldn't be this way. There should be a cover over 4 fuses. It was this way when I bought it. It looks like the previous owner had put in some new clips and jumpered over to them. I think the old fuse clips had broken off. So this kind of looks less than perfect, but it does function. And it also not only has speaker fuses, it has a protection relay. So it has 2 ways of protecting the receiver and the speakers. The Kenwood and the Sony have neither. So here are all 3 with the cases off. I got the Sansui in the middle, Sony on the left, Kenwood on the right. The Kenwood, you can tell why it doesn't weigh near as much as the other ones. There's not a whole lot in there. As I pointed out last time, this thing has had a rough life. It is pretty dirty. There is a lot jammed into this Sansui, and it has the biggest transformer of the 3, and the Sony's transformer is pretty big as well, with a lot jammed in there. So what it basically tells me is not a whole lot inside that Kenwood, but a lot in the other 2. Now let's take a look at the lights. So here is the Sony. You can see a blue hue coming out of there. Yeah, I have blue lights in this thing, but that thing shines up green. So it is a waste of blue lights. They are the fuse style. You just have to get in there and pop them in. That's easy enough. And then here is the light bulb for the meter. Apparently I just left the green incandescent in there, but that is just a socket, so that should be pretty easy. So pretty easy on the Sony. So here is the Sansui. It has white lights, and if you would have asked me if I had LEDs in here, I would have said, yeah, I do. I have LEDs in all of mine. But I don't know if you can tell, those are not LEDs, those are incandescents. They look old and original, but shine bright enough that apparently I never bothered to even pursue putting LEDs in there. So you do have the fuse style. All you got to do is take some stuff off and get to them. Not too bad. So here are the Kenwood lights. That's for the meters. It's just a socket. That's pretty easy. And then for the FM dial, you have fuse style. I was putting this video together and realized I misspoke. That is not a socket. It is a rubber grommet that had a bulb permanently fixed in there. I had to snip it and basically solder in that LED bulb. So I probably got it wrong in the other Kenwood video too. So for this comparison, I listened to 3 songs, Separate Ways by Journey, Run Through the Jungle by CCR, and a song called New York City by Lenny Kravitz. I streamed the song to 2 receivers and then switched the speakers back and forth using Duke Audio Switch. Loudness controls turned on, and they were volume matched tone controls at the 12 o'clock position. First up, we had the Kenwood KR-4070 and the Sony STR-6055. On the first song, Separate Ways, there's that intro everybody knows with the keyboard, and then after that intro, before he starts singing, their drums kind of kick in on the 4th beat. It's boom, boom, and then that boom on that intro and that first verse on the Sony sounds bigger, clearer, rings more on the Sony than it does on the Kenwood. A lot of other differences between these 2. I'm going to give the first song there to the Sony. And then on Run Through the Jungle, this one is a little closer. There is not a lot of bass on this song, just a lot of highs. I'm still going to give it to the Sony for really having just a bigger sound stage than the Kenwood. The Kenwood sounds great, don't get me wrong. Sounds good, not great. Sounds good. So don't get me wrong, I'm not bad-mouthing the Kenwood, but the Sony is just doing some things better. And then on the final song, New York City, Again, I'm going to give it to the Sony for really just better drums, bigger sound stage, overall better presentation. Next up, we have the Kenwood KR-4070 and the Sansui Six on separate ways. In the intro, before he starts singing, they're pretty close. You flip back and forth, and you're like, oh, these are very similar. And then he starts singing, and oh, the Sansui is doing something the Kenwood's not. It's making the Kenwood sound muffled. The Sansui is really pushing the mids out there. Very clear, very airy, just pushing a lot of music that the Kenwood's not. Same for the next two songs, maybe not as noticeable on the CCR song, but a bigger soundstage on the Sansui, clear highs, just all around better presentation than the Kenwood. Kenwood's good, Sansui is just better. And next up we have the Sony STR-6055 and the Sansui Six. This one was difficult. These two both sound really good, and they don't sound the same. When you flip back and forth, it's like, oh yeah, you can hear differences. But the question is, what are those differences and which one is better? So I'm gonna jump to the third song. This is the one that clued me in on what the differences mostly were. On the Lenny Kravitz song, there's a bass line that is more prominent and more clear and deeper on the Sony than the Sansui. I mean, you can hear it in the Sansui, but it isn't as distinct. It's not as separated. The Sony is separating the bass a little bit better, making it a little more clear. They both have big sound stages. They're both very clear in the highs and the mids. I'm gonna say the Sony actually has probably a little better sound stage. It just gets a little wider. So I gave all three songs begrudgingly to the Sony because it was really close. And I don't want you to think that the Sansui is inferior. It's just different. Different in a way that's hard to put into words and hard to even pick up. They are different, but I think the biggest difference is the sound stage and the bass on the Sony is just, in my opinion, a little bit better. So I'm going to give all three of these to the Sony. So as always, I get a second opinion from my wife, Laura, who's making dinner and making all sorts of noise upstairs. But she listened to these as well, doesn't know my opinion, and concluded that she liked the Kenwood versus the Sony on the one song, the CCR song. She thought the Sony could be a little harsh on that particular song. As a matter of fact, she thought the Sony could be harsh here and there, depending on the volume. She must have had it cranked up louder than me because I didn't think the Sony sounded harsh at all. But she did prefer the Sony on the other two songs over the Kenwood. Between the Sansui and the Kenwood, Sansui all the way. She liked the Sansui. And then the Sansui on the Sony, she picked the Sansui all the way on that for having just a better sound stage and for reasons she couldn't put her fingers on, which I understand. It's like they're different. Which one's better? She thought the Sansui was better. So to summarize, all three of these are good. I believe the Kenwood in my collection of all these amps, all these receivers, is like kind of the Mendoza line. If you're better than the Kenwood, you're doing pretty good. The Sony and the Sansui are better than the Kenwood. They're doing pretty good. And in my mind, I actually kind of liked the Sony. I mean, just by a hair over the Sansui, and I think it's just for the deeper bass. The Sansui sounds fantastic. This is a great amp, but I prefer the Sony. But again, my wife preferred the Sansui, so both fantastic, both better than the Kenwood. They did outperform the Kenwood. Maybe that was a little unfair, but these two are close. They're different. I would say they both have great sound stages. I would say the Sony has probably a little better bass, and maybe the Sansui is a little smoother on the highs. So I want to end on value. Here you can see the prices on what they were new and what you pay for one today. You can see that Sansui cost a lot of money in the day. It's got a lot of features in there. That's not terribly surprising. But as far as the prices today, you can get a Kenwood pretty cheap, a little more for the Sony. I got to go, the best value is being the Sony. Yeah, you're going to pay more than that Kenwood, but you're getting more than you are in the Kenwood. The Sansui, you would pay more, but you're not getting much. If anything, you're just getting different good, not necessarily better, in my opinion, than the Sony. So I got to go with the Sony as being the best value. It's a good buy. If you can pick one up for that price that you saw there or less, by all means, jump on it. The Sony STR-6055, best value. So I want to thank you for watching. I got more videos on the channel. If you're interested, please watch them and please subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.